Muted.
Great, thank you.
Muted.
So welcome everyone.
Muted.
I'd like to thank you for joining today's webcast about CA Directory. My name is Rob Lindberg, and I'm the product manager for CA Directory. And I have along with me our product specialist, Berman, who will also be monitoring questions and helping us throughout this webcast. So I thought I would start with just a high-level conversation about why do we talk about directories. Well, we think about directories as infrastructure, but the reliability and performance of the directory is fundamental to operations for online applications. If you're thinking about 5 nines of performance and that's your target, the directory needs to actually outperform that, maybe 7 nines, much higher reliability if you want your applications to be reliable. Also, as organizations grow, the directory is often overlooked, maybe managed by other teams, no SLAs, and our product marketing specialist, Rob Marty, put a nice little blog together that covers some of the high-level points about why directories need to be considered in your infrastructure. And lastly, not every directory is created equal. Even directories that say they support LDAP may be configured or implemented differently. Some instances, you may need an external load balancer, whereas CA Directory has internal routing. Some may need a backing database requiring a larger footprint. We don't. And for us, anyone that's connecting as an LDAP client, we just look like we're read-write accessible to the data, eliminating some complex referral logic. So let's get into begin to really the content. So today we're going to cover a number of features and enhancements that have been added really in the last 2 releases, and I'll go over those individually. So as you can see here on this slide, we've done a lot with directory in the last year, and in the last 6 months, we've released 2 versions that incorporate a number of very exciting features, and some of which I'll go through today. We're actually looking to move directory, like many other CA products, to a release cadence of 2 releases a year. And I would say if you have questions during the presentation, we're going to have a question and answer period at the end, but feel free to type a question into the Q&A panel, and we'll look to answer those throughout the presentation. So one of the major new features that we brought in to 12.5 is a new administrative UI, a brand new interface that supports configuring, managing, administrating directory environments. It supports multiple hosts, so it can be used across several different installations. It works with the existing configuration and helps migrate from our old user interface, and includes a mechanism so that you can force a synchronization of the config from the UI to ensure consistency. We also introduced a REST API specifically for managing and monitoring the infrastructure, allowing you to programmatically discover and configure directory servers. And we use this API ourselves internally by the management UI, so we ensure that it functions correctly. If you haven't yet seen the new UI, I thought I would bring a few screenshots rather than trying to do a live demo. But you can see here a very clean Web 2.0 style interface with tabs on the left showing the environments that you're managing. We have a great topology review, which shows an overview of the hosts and DSAs, as well as the configurations and connections that enable you to see, for instance, what router config is connecting to the data pieces in your infrastructure. And by selecting each of these nodes, you're presented with a configuration set of actions on the right side. We've also localized the UI. We provide currently a French and Japanese version of the interface selectable in the browser for the administrator. We plan to be adding Spanish and Brazilian Portuguese to the UI, as well as localizing our documentation for all 4 of these languages later this year. So stay tuned for that. We made a number of security improvements, starting with new user password algorithms, scrypt and bcrypt. scrypt helps prevent against brute force attacks by being computationally expensive, and bcrypt uses salts and iterations to provide rainbow table protection, cached hashes, as well as being very computationally expensive. One benefit of the password hashing is that you can configure this new hash, and as users change their password, the hash is updated, whereas old hashes can stay in the system and they can live together. So there's no requirement to convert all users in one go. And after some period of time, you can inspect the system to see how many users are still on the old hash algorithm. We've done some Linux hardening through the use of compiler options to help prevent malicious attacks by doing things like creating position-independent executables and address layout randomization. We also prevent writable memory from being executed, all in an attempt to ensure that CA Directory has very secure executables. And lastly, we've updated OpenSSL to ensure that we've addressed all of the recent vulnerabilities that have been reported against OpenSSL versions. It's important for us that we stay current with components that we use that have identified vulnerabilities. We've also added in the new release several self-diagnostic capabilities that help ensure that as Directory is a mission-critical service, it's important that performance is not impacted. And these were added in 12.6. One is identifying when we have slow searches. As you can see, if a search request threshold timeout is exceeded, we log that information and provide a warning, and also indicate if the filter is accessing attributes that are not indexed, therefore resulting in performance problems. We identify slow replication, so that if you're doing synchronous replication and a peer does not respond, we log an alarm and show that slowdown as a problem within the system. Lastly, we detect CPU starvation situations. Directory doesn't only run on physical hardware, but many people run it on virtualized environments. And we can detect CPU starvation problems which can occur, for example, when operations like VM snapshots are occurring. And if we see a situation in which Directory is not receiving its fair share of CPU cycles, we can detect that and log a problem, identifying potential performance issues. We've made a couple enhancements to improve the scalability of the product as well. We've removed the hard limit on persistent searches. Persistent searches are a special kind of search which remain connected, and if updates result in a change in the data that the filter would identify, a new search result is returned, and the client then controls the connection to the search. Previously, we had a limit of 10, but many environments were seeing that they needed more, so we've eliminated the hard limit. We've also removed the limit of horizontal partitions, which used to be 16, and now being unlimited helps us with horizontal scaling. We've also made a couple significant performance improvements. We've improved the router throughput, allowing you to specify an internal number of outbound connections, which could increase the amount of requests through searches nearly 100%. Obviously, mileage may vary, but our internal testing shows a significant gain for high search loads by controlling this setting. Lastly, we've helped with indexing by using better thread utilization. Previously, we had a maximum limit of 8 threads, and now we leverage all available threads during the indexing process. We've made a couple changes to the installation, specifically on Unix, when using non-root users. We understand many security installations prefer a non-root installation, and we've improved that situation. We've also added some new platforms, Windows 2016 and Ubuntu 16, so you have more choices in where you want to install CA Directory. We've also announced an end-of-service schedule. So for those of you who are running on older releases, if you're running on R12 SP14 and older, released several years ago, our end-of-service date is January next year. If you're running on one of the newer service packs on R12, we've announced an end-of-service of February 2019, giving you some understanding of when you would like to upgrade. We also plan to, and we do, announce now the actual end-of-service schedule when we GA the product versions, just like we did with 12.6, giving you the information right away to know how much lead time you have to leverage that version. So I have a poll here. CJ, I think we're ready for the poll. Just a couple quick questions that I would appreciate our participants to answer. The first is, what version of directory are you currently running today? Are you running one of the very old service packs, a newer service pack? Are you running 12.5, or are you already running the new 12.6 version? Or do you support directory, or you're not using directory? And then if you do need to upgrade, when do you plan to upgrade? In the next month or two? Maybe in the next 6 months? In the next year, or sometime after this year? So we'll get some poll. Take a minute for the participants here to actually take a chance in the poll. I think, CJ, we can continue answering the poll and move on.
That's fine.
Great. So you've got another few minutes to answer the poll. And I'll keep going. So the last kind of major feature I wanted to discuss today, which we introduced in this latest release, 12.6, is our integration and support for migrating away from Oracle Directory Server Enterprise Edition. As many of you hopefully know by now, Oracle has deprecated this and announced an end of life. Previously, CA Directory provided a conversion from Oracle that we would really describe as a quick cutover. It potentially had high risk, some services costs, and required third-party software to keep the two directories in sync during any sort of transition period. Doing a quick cutover really involved understanding what applications were using Oracle, moving all of the data in a one-time migration, and then in one go, transfer all of the connections of those applications to CA Directory. So what have we changed? In the release, we've added new tools that help you pull in the Oracle data. We also allow for bidirectional synchronization with Oracle, which allows you to applications to migrate one at a time. Kind of looks like this. You identify what applications are using Oracle, just like you did previously. But instead of a significant cutover or an immediate cutover, you configure the bidirectional synchronization, and that enables you to move one application after another individually over to the CA directory infrastructure. This is also about reducing risk. This phased approach allows you to move one application at a time. It requires less coordination between the application teams, and if something doesn't work, you can roll back one application that you've just converted. Also, integrations with single sign-on that you have can be moved a single protected application at a time, because single sign-on is flexible in how it uses directories and can be configured with directory mapping to ensure that you still maintain single sign-on as you add a new directory. But it's not just about integrating and moving off because of Oracle. It's because CA Directory is a better product. One of our Fortune 100 customers did their own benchmarking and showed that once they converted over to CA Directory from Oracle, as you can see, authentications were 95% faster. Directory handled nearly 6 times more authentications per second. Searches were nearly 90% faster. And we handled 2.5 more times searches per second than Oracle. Many benefits for running CA Directory over your Oracle environment. A few other tidbits to mention I wanted to bring up on this call. First, we started to produce a couple videos published on CA Technology's YouTube channel related to directory. We have a couple related to Oracle and the migration and setup that I was just describing, including a high-level presentation and a how-to that describes the 5 simple steps to actually configure the connection between the two products and how easy it is to bring in the replication and data between the two. We also have a high-level overview of the data sovereignty rules, GDPR, and how directory can be set up with its distribution model to isolate data at rest in the countries in which they need to reside in order to maintain those data sovereignty rules. We're launching a validation project, something we haven't yet done for directory, at validate.ca.com. As many of the security products and CA products in general move to an agile development model, we want to engage with customers during the development process, and we do that using the validation project. Registration information will be coming out shortly as we begin requesting and engaging with customers on our new release. We're also doing some internal benchmarking using CA's new product, BlazeMeter. It's an excellent tool that's enabling us to drive CA Directory to its highest performance and measure the actual results of how quickly the throughput and how many operations per second we're doing. And I would encourage you to attend the webcast coming up in just a few weeks, where we will actually be demonstrating how to use BlazeMeter with single sign-on and directories right there as well, supporting the infrastructure. So I thought I would take a moment here to answer questions. That's the material that I've had to present. Hopefully you've gotten a good overview of the features that we've been doing and some of the exciting new content that we've brought to you in the last 6 months. And I don't know, Aaron, if we've had some questions on the Q&A. Happy to kind of go through those as well.
Yeah, Rob, we had a couple of questions on the Q&A. I've been trying to answer them throughout. But maybe if you can go in a little bit more depth on CA Directory running in virtual machines and some of the things we're doing to detect and avoid diagnostics in virtual machine environments.
Sure, I can touch on that. So the question is really about virtual environments, yes. So the directory runs in a virtual environment, and we're actually going to be making sure that we have full evaluations of things like AWS and Azure, where Directory currently runs today. And one of the comments, as I made, about features is in those virtual environments, resources can become scarce when you're running virtual operations, such as moving that VMware instance to another host or actually doing a snapshot and backing up the data of the host. And we want to ensure that the performance of CA Directory is not impacted, or if there is an impact, that we detect that and alert that situation so you know that you're causing problems in your directory infrastructure. I got a question on the chat as well that said, can an old version of CA Directory and 12.6 work together? And we can. There is some integration between the versions. We want that to be a seamless experience, but we'd encourage all of the components to be upgraded through the end. Do we have any other questions, Aaron, that we need to answer?
Rob, there was some interest in, I think we'll probably have to take it offline, but there was certainly some interest in search time threshold, understanding how granular it is, if it can be done by OU, individual client, groups of clients, and so on. I don't know if you have any of that information, or we can just take it offline.
I think we're going to have to take that offline, Aaron. I want to make sure we get accurate information for questions of that level of detail. Happy to try and answer it. We can follow up offline.
Yep. Yep. And then there was a question that just came up from Anil, and asking about the admin UI, remove the dependency on JExplorer or other LDAP search tools.
Yep.
Maybe you can try to talk about the difference between the UI and the LDAP clients.
Yep. Yeah, sure. So the administrative UI that we've built enables you to manage all of the configuration components, looking at the hosts, the directory system agents, the ones that are set up as data as well as routers, but it's not designed to be an LDAP browser. So if you're looking at something that will give you access to view the actual data, we still kind of encourage the use of JExplorer or some other LDAP browsing tool. There's also a question I see, Aaron, coming in about what is the process for migrating DX Manager to the new UI. I don't have all of the specifics of that right in front of me. I know that the new UI actually looks at the configuration data from DX Manager and basically sucks it in and represents the environment. So I don't believe there's many significant migration steps. It's just a question of installing the new UI, connecting it to the host where the old data is. All good questions. I didn't mention, and I will now because we're getting some questions, all of our documentation for the newest versions as well as a couple versions back is available on CA's DocOps wiki platform, and I would encourage you to review that documentation, and it enables you to comment directly on the page to see if there's an area that needs clarification or if there's an update that's required. And that documentation is updated out of band from the releases. So if we have feedback that would say we need to clarify a process or there was some question, you'll see an immediate update to the documentation without waiting for a new release of the product.
And Rob, there was another question that came in asking about pointing a new version of a router to an older DSA.
Yeah, correct. I think that there is support for that. The APIs work. I would have to check into the specific details about what versions we feel would be compatible. Certainly want to follow up. I don't want to misstate exactly the level of compatibility between those versions, but understand it's necessary to migrate components individually. So there's a question here I see about, do we have any information about how quickly the new versions will be integrated in those products? Well, I'm happy to say specifically things like Identity Manager and Single Sign-On, that we're working with the other security product teams to ensure that the newest versions of Directory are supported and listed on their platform support matrix to show that we have compatibility. Identity Manager was updated earlier this week, and we should see official updates for Single Sign-On later this week. And we've been working closely with those teams to ensure that as we get new releases on this accelerated cadence of 2 a year, that as soon as we do the release, we've shown a certification with those products. And I've been speaking with the product manager for Identity Manager to ensure their virtualized platform stays as current as possible with the version of Directory that they embed in their infrastructure. So we're getting a couple questions now about, do we support LDAP proxy referral options? I think we've gone beyond a little bit of my technical capability, and I don't want to give an incorrect answer there. We'll certainly follow up. I think, Denny, you asked that question. We'll make sure we follow up and get you an answer. We'll get a transcript of the Q&A and make sure all of the questions that get asked get answered correctly. So we got a question here. It says, how passwords are moved, copied from ODSE to CA Directory. So passwords are stored in the directory itself, and one of the steps to do a migration is to export the data from Oracle and load it into Directory. So we move them through a process of importing the LDIF. And then once the synchronization is set up, changes that are made to Oracle are then replicated over to Directory to keep the two systems in sync while you're completing the migration away from Oracle.
Rob, I would add there is that, you know, what the way Directory works in that regard is it allows us to have different users that have different password hashes in flight. So, you know, you decide you want to change from SHA-256 to SHA-512. You can have some users of both, and then you decide 3 months later you want to go to eCrypt. You can go to that, and then as users move their passwords from one to another, their passwords are hashed with the latest algorithm. It also works on how you come in.
Exactly. And I think I mentioned that earlier as well with the newer password algorithms, that you can maintain 2 sets of hashes while you're doing a migration to a stronger hash. Well, I think we're seeing kind of a tail off. CJ, do we have some of the answers to the polls? Is that something I can see?
It's something that I have saved in the background. It's the only way I can do it is show it off. So.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we probably could close the poll. It's just about done, I think.
Yep, it's closed.
Great. Excellent. Great. So when would I see results? Just got interested in our participants here and what versions they're using. Maybe not. We'll get that data, I'm sure. Well, I think we're at the end of our session. I appreciate that you've attended today, and certainly if you have any further questions about the product, I would encourage you to use our community. The Directory community is pretty active. It's one of the categories of the security community. I didn't have a link, but I'm sure you'll easily be able to find it. And we'll look to answer and monitor questions there. And I'll go over with Aaron the questions that were asked to ensure that we've covered all of the questions that are currently being asked. So I think we have one last question here. Is about, will any text-based changes be picked up by the UI? So initially, the configuration is captured by the UI when the UI is installed and started. And at that point, we encourage people to use the UI to manage their configurations. If they're really using text scripts, et cetera, to manage the configurations, we'd recommend that they would just continue to do that. And we're looking at future enhancements that would ensure that that type of environment stays consistent between the UI and the text script changes. Right now, the UI becomes the master of the changes and can force a synchronization, but not the reverse. Great. Well, I think, guys, this was fantastic. I'm going to close the webcast today. Thank you again for attending today. This recording will be posted on the community for anyone who missed it, and I would encourage you to continue to ask questions about Directory. Look forward to participating in our validation project so that you have a sneak peek at all of the features that we're developing for later this year, and I look forward to hearing from all of you in some form or another. Thank you again. I think, CJ, we're done with the webcast.
Yep, thanks everyone for joining.